Okay, and in this video we're going to discuss the steps that make up macro learning. Okay, we're going to focus on macro. Macro, unlike micro, cannot be, it's not a whole bunch of linear steps that you do one and then you do the other one and you do the next one, you do the next one, and they all go in an order and you know exactly, almost mathematically, how to proceed and approach learning Gemara. Macro is sort of a grouping of various tools that you use to get a grand picture of what's going on in the Gemara. So there are primarily five steps to macro, and the first one is finding your sources. Okay, sources. That's the first one. Okay, oopsie daisy, sources. Okay, knowing your sources. You want to know where they begin and end, okay, and type. Okay, you want to know if it's a brisa, a mishnah, a tosefta, a pasuk, a memra, and we'll get into all of these things in more depth as we discuss macro in further videos, but just to understand, it's very important to know when a source begins and ends so that you can know when that piece is done, and then you will know, okay, the Gemara has done, it's done something, and then a source comes in, and then something else. So you know this source is going to tie into the discussion and you can encapsulate, and macro is very much into this, you can encapsulate this source, and it's a piece of the discussion. You can view this source as a whole, and then when you're doing your micro on this source, you'll know that this is one contained object that then has to tie in with what's going on around it. So knowing your source, where it begins, where it ends, so that you know what it is and where it is, and then the type is very important, because if a pasuk is being used as a proof or as part of a question against an amora or against a mishnah even, that's a problem, because a pasuk is very, very high level and mishnah, would be underneath it. But if it was a brisa attacking a mishnah, well, the brisa is not necessarily on the same level as the mishnah. The mishnah is more authoritative, and therefore you don't have to be as concerned about the resolution of that question. So, and I don't want to confuse you with this whole discussion, but to focus on sources, knowing when they end, knowing when they start, and knowing the type of source is very important. So that's the first part of macro, would be to it's not first because there's no order to it, but one of the steps is to make sure you know where all the sources are in the piece of Gemara that you are learning. Okay? Now, step number 2 is like this. Step number 2 is to translate words, okay? Translate words. Translate. Now, this is different than micro. Micro, we said that you wanted to have a literal translation. Literal translation. Okay, that's what we said for micro. Micro, you just want to know that this word means this and this word means that, and you're not focused on macro. So a good example of this would be if we had the expression ta shma. Okay, now if we were doing micro, we would know ta means to come and shema means to hear. So we would figure that this means come and hear. Okay, pretty simple. But if we were doing macro, we would focus on translation of phrases. So we would look at tashma as a whole, and tashma, being a very important phrase, is actually indicating a new step. Okay, so by translation here, you're trying to pick out keywords in the flow of the Gemara. You'll be looking for words that indicate questions, answers, statements, proofs, queries. Okay, these are things that you'll be looking for. Many key words that will tip you off. So these are the words you're looking for. These types of words, and in macro you want to be able to translate and know what these words are in the Gemara so that you can have a picture of the Gemara before you even start to understand the basic meaning, the actual meaning of the discussion. You will know that the Gemara is going to ask a question, then it's going to answer it, then it's going to bring a proof to the question, so the question resumes, and then you're going to have to answer it a different way, and that's the whole Gemara. So you're going to know going in what to expect in a Gemara. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3. Okay, step number 3 is you want to look at the Gemara as a whole. Okay, look at it as see the sugya. Sugya is the piece of Gemara. Sugya as a whole. Okay? So this means that if you have a Gemara like this, right? And so I have, my question, I have my answer, I have my statement, I have a source, and then I have, another question and another answer. Okay, so I'm seeing the sugya as its whole. Okay, I'm putting together my where everything is, and this ties into the second step where you're putting together a picture of the sugya. Okay, so you want to see it as a whole unit. You want to see, okay, if it ends off with a bottom line, so it'll say like this. Let's say it starts off trying to figure out something. It's trying to figure out something, and at the end there's a bottom line. So the sugya is going to go through some discussion. Whatever the discussion is, it's going to come out with the halacha, if it's a hilchasa or something like that. So again, we're trying to get, with macro, we're trying to get the big picture of the sugya. Okay? See it as one unit, made up of steps, not the individual steps. Okay? Now, step number 4. Step number 4 is to write out. Okay, and this can be done with drawings, diagrams, flow charts. Okay, by writing it out will really give you a concrete understanding of the Mishnah. You'll be able to say, Rav says, Rav says X, and then there's a question by Shmuel, which is and then there's an answer by Rav again. Okay, so then when I see Amar Rav, and then I see Amar Shmuel, and then Amar Rav, so then I'm going to know that this first Rav is going to be a question when it's going to be something, some statement. When I'm learning the Gemara, the piece that he's saying, when I'm learning this part here with micro, I'm going to know that it's a statement. And then I'm going to know that this part here is a question. And then with Rav, I'm going to know he's answering it just from writing it out and seeing the picture and tying it in again with seeing the sugya as a whole in step 3 and translating and picking out the key words. Okay, and then the last step is different than the previous. The previous 3 have been very tied together, but the last step is to look up concepts. Okay, look up concepts. Okay, and this is important because the Gemara may be talking about demai, and you have no idea what demai is. So you, even if you could figure out, you can translate the Gemara, you can read it, you will not understand what's going on. And even if you understand a little bit, because the Gemara explains itself and it talks it out quite a lot, you still won't understand the depths of what's going on without understanding all the little nuances of demai or shibud or shchita even, or karbonos. You have to look up concepts brought in the Gemara. You should look them up, and a couple of ways to look them up would be to do, if it's a Mishnah, you can look it up in Kahati, or for his introduction to the Mishnah, where he'll introduce these concepts. A very good source for this is the Steinsaltz Sefer, which is called the Talmud, and it's part of the original Steinsaltz Shas. I think it's the first volume or whatever. It's just introduction, and it has tons and tons and tons of concepts with short, easy to understand paragraphs with pictures and explanations of what everything is, what's truma, what's meiser, what's challah, what's shchita, what's all of these things. It explains in very clear, simple, easy, basic definitions that'll get you started on the sugya. Okay, these concepts are also things that you would want to look up in an art scroll, or look up. Your Rebbe is also a good source. Ask your Rebbe, look it up in an art scroll, listen, go to a shir, have a hakdama by somebody on the sugya. Sometimes Rashi and Tosfos will throw in explanations more. Oftentimes Rashi will do it, but if it's something that's really off the wall, sometimes Rashi will explain it himself, but you may not understand Rashi if you're having trouble reading. You may not understand Rashi, what his explanation of it. You might need a further explanation. So looking up concepts and understanding concepts discussed will make understanding all the other parts of the Gemara that you've already figured out about this sugya will make them make more sense. So just to review quickly, we have, first thing is figure out sources, when they begin, when they end, and what type of source they are. Okay? 2, translate keywords and pick them out. Just skim through the whole sugya and just pick out the keywords that you see that just pop right out, and see the sugya as a whole. Figure out what those keywords are in terms of questions, answers, statements, how your sources tie in, and you'll begin to see a picture of the Gemara. Then write out this picture. You'll see, I have a question, I have an answer, there's a machlokas, what's going to happen, I'm going to need this chart, I'm going to need that. How am I going to approach this sugya in a dynamic way? Okay, and then the last part is look up any concepts you see that are mentioned in the Gemara. And as we said, the Talmud by Rav Steinsaltz is an excellent resource for this, as is your Rebbe. Alright, so Hatzlacha Rabba, and in the next couple of videos we'll get into tackling how to do these steps with in a more extended fashion. Hatzlacha Rabba, and all the best.